What's going on, Rangers fans? Jared Sandler here with our pregame news and notes. And I want to start with a former Red Sox player who's now with the Rangers, and Brock Holt. And we had a chance to speak with Brock prior to the series, and he talked about his time with the Red Sox. He's a fan favorite there. And it's a reminder, it's something I've shared before, that, you know, as we have a focus on team building and looking towards the future, not every acquisition, not every player the Rangers trade for, draft, sign, whatever, is going to be a star, is going to be a guy that you want to build your lineup around. Obviously, if a team can, comprise a lineup full of 9 all-stars, great. But the reality is that just it doesn't happen. 4 or 5, yeah. Maybe another 2 who would be all-stars if, you didn't have this, everyone has a representative rule. Okay, possibly. But the Brock Holt thing to me is a reminder that, these guys are important too. Now, they're not more important than, the anchor of your lineup or the anchors, right? You look at, say, the Dodgers, having a Corey Seager and a Mookie Betts. I mean, those guys are tremendously important. Okay. On those Red Sox teams, again, Mookie Betts, JD Martinez, those guys were more important. You take those guys over a Brock Holt any day of the week, but guys like Brock Holt are important. And so as we assess the 2021 Rangers and look ahead to future teams and future successes and wonder, is this guy going to be a part of it? Is that guy going to be a part of it? I think we have the tendency sometimes to evaluate it from a standpoint of, is this guy a star or not? When the reality is, while that's a necessary question to ask, there are other types of players who make up championship teams. And you don't want to have a lineup full of 8 role players. You don't need 8 Brock Holts, but you're probably going to have, and you probably want to have 1 or 2 Brock Holts, as opposed to, guys who are just kind of in the lineup. They're obviously, again, you're not choosing a Brock Holt over a Mookie Betts, but you're choosing a Brock Holt over a guy who is frustratingly inconsistent, maybe someone with more potential but not as reliable. There's a reason why guys like Brock Holt are so beloved. And, for the Rangers, if you consider 2010, 2011, I think of a guy like David Murphy. No one would confuse David Murphy for an all-star. But David Murphy was an important part of those teams, came up in big spots, fulfilled a role. You knew what you were going to get. So I think for me, Brock Holt's a reminder that those guys are important too. Koharihara struggled last night. It's the second straight rough start. And I think the Rangers have to at least consider the possibility that the adjustment from a career spent benefiting from 6 days rest to now a change in which he's getting just 4 days rest typically, and doing so against the toughest competition in the world, have had an impact. That's not to say that is the primary reason or a reason at all as to why he struggled. Perhaps he just doesn't have the stuff right now that's good enough to get major league hitters out. But that is a big difference. I mean, this is not a guy who spent 2 years in Japan on 6 days rest. This is a guy who spent more than a decade in Japan in a certain routine with a certain pattern of physical work that has been altered. 2 days in the grand scheme of things is somewhat significant. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Rangers push back Arihara's next start to see how he responds. But with all that said, again, this is not an excuse. It's just an investigation as to why the Koharihara that we saw over the first 3 or 4 starts is not the same guy we've seen over the last 2. A guy who over the last 2 has appeared to be way more hittable, and the reactions of the hitters are way more calm and comfortable, as opposed to the indecisive reactions we got in his first few starts, in which he was getting a lot of weak contact. Now, one statistical thing that he needs to improve upon, regardless of whether he gets 4, 6, 27 days rest, it doesn't matter. he's only throwing first pitch strikes around 50% of the time. The league average is around 60%. And as you know, there's a big difference when you get ahead of a hitter 0-1 versus when you fall behind a hitter 1-0. And right now, Koharihara, who does not have dynamite, dynamic wipeout stuff, is putting himself in a tough position of falling behind 1-0 versus getting ahead 0-1 far too often, especially for someone who has and relies on control. He's got to be better at getting strike one. A few other things. Kyle Gibson a couple of nights ago, didn't do one of these yesterday, had a great outing. Ian Kennedy, another save. It is very possible that one or both of those guys get moved before the deadline. They both are certainly going to be in conversations when you start to hear the rumors and the national talking heads talk about this guy and that guy who's available and this guy could be a fit. There's no doubt that at this rate, Kyle Gibson and Ian Kennedy are both going to get mentioned. I think Ian Kennedy has had a really big impact in a short time as a veteran presence in the bullpen filled with a lot of young guys. We've heard a lot of young guys, including Hyunjun Yang, as recently as today, talk about the impact of Ian Kennedy, not only on him, but on the bullpen as a whole. That impact is important, but it doesn't need to last an entire year. You know, a lot of times those impacts get carried out after the guy leaves. Ian Kennedy's on a one-year deal. I don't know what you get for him, but something perhaps might be better than nothing. And as you likely know, a closer is not nearly as valuable on a team not competing for a playoff spot than one that is. As far as Kyle Gibson, the Rangers might have an interesting decision here. Of course, they can always get blown away by a potential return for Kyle Gibson, something that they never thought was, in the discussion, in which case it's an easy decision. Chances are they're not going to get blown away. They're going to be deciding between some good offers. But the question they have to ask is, what does 2022 look like from a rotation standpoint? And how important, how necessary, how valuable can Kyle Gibson be if he stays with this club? Again, this is a guy who's not only performing well, but also holds a significant leadership responsibility and a significant degree of respect. And those guys in a rebuild are important. You don't need a ton of them, but you do need some of them to help guide your young arms. The other thing to remember here, playoffs are going to be expanded next year. Not that the Rangers right now appear to be on the cusp of that, benefiting from that, but what happens if the Rangers go out and they sign a Trevor Story and they go and maybe sign a maybe not an ace pitcher, but a really good pitcher? And we see development from guys like Nick Solak and Willie Calhoun. And all of a sudden, expanded playoffs, maybe keeping Kyle Gibson is a good thing. So the Rangers are going to have some interesting decisions there with Kyle Gibson. Final thing here, the Rangers continue to struggle offensively at home. They're scoring twice as many runs on the road as they are at home. The numbers across the board look totally different, road versus home. Obviously, road being more favorable. It's tough to compare last year to this year. It's a different group of guys, different circumstances. This year, still probably too small of a sample size, but at some point, we're going to get to a line here where it's like, this is now a trend. This has got to stop. This team has got to be better at producing at home. You play at your home park 81 times. You play at other parks for one series, maybe two or three if it's a divisional team. That's it. You play 81 games at home. It's not realistic that every team is always going to have a winning record at home, because then there would never be teams that win 100 games if every team had a winning record at home and never on the road. But home has got to be more of an advantage for this team. And offensively, they got to figure out how to perform as consistently as they do on the road with that level of success, or as consistently at home as they do on the road. That's our news and notes for today. Talk to y'all later.